growing old, deathbed conversations, space burials.
I doubt my grandma would be a fan.
Cemeteries, of course, bucket lists.
I think it's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Death, 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 death.
Why is death so hard to talk about? Yes, it's scary and uncomfortable, but so are the things leading up to it. Illness, growing old, yet we discuss those. Why not death itself? This question came to mind this summer while working at a cemetery. When people hear where I worked, they have a couple key questions. Did you dig graves? And did you see any bodies? No, and no. But try to push the discussion any further into spending time at a crematorium, the different funerals I've witnessed, my new perspective on mortality, and suddenly everyone is quick to change the subject. My goal is to break the topic taboo surrounding death by exploring the ideas, history, and customs that come with it. I plan to be on here talking about death until my last breath, or something like that. My name is Rachel Gordon, and welcome to Better Off Dead.
Today's podcast is brought to you by iBooks. Go on iBooks and look up Better Off Dead for our list of must-reads. From Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking to Mitch Albom's classic Tuesdays with Morrie. iBooks, bringing you more of what you need.
So, let's talk about death. Having spent a summer looking for the funniest grave markers, my perspective is slightly different than your average bear. To avoid giving only my comfortably morbid viewpoint, I asked around, trying to figure out why society is so uncomfortable discussing the big D. Wait, scratch that. Not the big D. This is why I have to talk to other people. When is the last time before this interview that you had a discussion about death?
Discussion I can't really remember, but it is something I think about sometimes.
Probably last night. I was with my friends and we got into a real deep conversation.
Probably when someone last died, I don't know. It's not really a topic that's usually talked about.
Have you ever talked about death with your family?
No, it's just never been a conversation.
They've been like, yeah, we made a will, you're in the will. And I'm like, stop talking about that. Like, it's so sad. It's not something I want to think about.
It's mostly people close to us passing away. That's when we talk about it.
When you see death in movies and pop culture, what's that usually like? How do you find it portrayed?
It's very, I don't want to say dramatic, but they make it seem a lot less common than it really is.
Sometimes downplayed when it comes to violence. It's just kind of a thing that happens.
Emotional. A lot of tears usually. They don't really cover other emotions that people have in reaction to death.
Game of Thrones, everyone dies. People are like, which one is going to be next? That kind of plays on death as a game and just brush someone off for pure entertainment.
Where do you think you've gotten most of your information on death?
Probably TV and movies.
I mean, I guess it would be from people close to me passing away.
I don't really have any education on death or haven't learned a ton about it.
Now, are these attitudes limited to our North American bubble? Let's widen our scope and take a peek at how the rest of the world deals with death and dying. Funerals in Canada tend to be a solemn, serious affair. However, in Ghana, the keyword isn't serious, but rather novelty. Novelty coffins, that is. According to Atlas Obscura, funerals in this West African nation have always been an occasion for both mourning and celebration. And in recent years, coffins made to represent the people inside them have become a must-have. These range from a hammer coffin for a carpenter to a beautiful blue lobster coffin for a fisherman, and even a sneaker-shaped coffin for a soccer player. This merging of art and death brings levity and a personal touch to funerals. It makes them less about the service itself and more about honoring the individual. Now, what comes after the service? Well, in South Korea, they're less inclined to bury the dead as they are to display them. Initially brought on by a lack of space for burials in the small nation, the practice of transforming human remains into gem-like stones has caught on in South Korea like nowhere else. The Associated Press cites the cost at about $900, less than it costs for most coffins and burial plots. The process acts as both a solution for the lack of space and a way to preserve loved ones in a way that can be shown rather than closed up in an urn. The CEO of one bead-making company explains that the beautiful gems take some of the fear away. You don't feel that these beads are creepy, he told the LA Times. In fact, there's a holiness and warmth to them. Now, once the departed are buried or beaded, most cultures leave it at that. While for the Toraja in South Sulawesi, Indonesia, death of the body doesn't mark the end. Well, talking to the dead is considered worrisome in the West. In Sulawesi, it's respectful. And not just to their spirits, but face-to-face with the dead bodies. As National Geographic investigated, loved ones are often kept at home and cared for weeks, months, or even years after death. They are acknowledged, offered food, cleaned, and brought around town. A well-preserved body is thought to bring good fortune, and some are mummified with formaldehyde and water. Children are just as aware of the rituals of the dead as their elders, and they participate in them, unafraid. Why would they be? Rather than a row of abrupt beginnings and endings, the Taraja see the circularity of life, and in it nothing to fear, therefore no reason to hide their children from it or their dead relatives. Western cultures could certainly take some tips from these viewpoints and practice in the pursuit of a healthier attitude toward death, and how we discuss it before and after. For more on our North American viewpoint, we go to our studio interview with an expert equally worried about our approach to the inevitable and how we can go about changing it.
Perfect. All right, so today I'm sitting down with Cheryl and Kate. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
Tell me a bit about your work specifically as it deals with education on death.
I teach a death and dying elective at the Faculty of Social Work at Wilfrid Laurier. We look at working with people who are living with someone who is dying or working with someone who might be dying themselves. And then we also speak about the grieving process, what the grieving process looks like, what working with someone who might be grieving looks like.
When people receive that education, how do you believe it plays into how they cope when they are faced with death and dying?
So many people have commented that the course itself has been very, very helpful for them in the grieving process. And some have even gotten in touch with me and said, boy, you know, this happened afterwards. I was dealing with the death of someone very close to me, and I found it helpful. One of the things that I find is really very important about the course is that people need to be able to speak about death, and they need to be able to speak about dying if they're going to talk to somebody else about it. And I think that that's probably one of the most difficult things, is that it's hard for us to think about it ourselves. And if we can't talk and think about it ourselves, then it's going to be that much more difficult to ask somebody else what it's like for them. So I think the course puts it front and center in people's minds, and they're faced with having to talk about it and have to think about it. And I mean, part of it is just allowing people to feel more comfortable in terms of speaking about death and dying, because it's difficult. It's one of those areas that you don't show up at a cocktail party and start to talk about.
Do you think more education into death and dying will maybe not demystify it, but make it something that the people deal with as a bit more of a fact of life that we can discuss with each other?
I think education is really important. I show an education in grade school, right? Like well before people get to university. I show a video that I have, and there is a teacher who is, I think it's with students who are, people might think, oh, too young. So here's this teacher who's talking about death and dying. And I think the more people are able to see death and dying as just a regular part of our life cycle, which it is, people will approach it less fearfully and with less denial. So I think that it's very important. In fact, I'd love to be able to speak to teachers in grade schools about instituting something like that, because then it just doesn't seem so foreign.
And with that expert insight ringing in our ears, today's podcast has sadly come to a close. Many thanks to Cheryl and Kate for sitting down with us, all of our outdoor interview participants, and all the people behind the scenes at NPR who make this possible every week. For getting through all this talk of death, we're going to end on a lighter note, and we're going to turn our gaze to Gävle, Sweden. Every year in Gävle, to celebrate Advent, they build the Gävlebaken. It's a giant Christmas goat made out of straw. For the 50 years that they have made the Gävlebaken, it has been destroyed 35 times. The most popular mode of destruction? Arson. They have used guards who have been bribed, cameras that have been hacked, and fences the arsonist has come at with flaming arrows. Now, the goat's spokesman told the BBC, "Are we stubborn or are we stupid? I don't know, but we like the goat." Now, whether you see this story as hilarious or some inspiring example of holiday perseverance, we hope it leaves you smiling, and we'll see you around next week. I'm Rachel Gordon, and this has been Better Off Dead.